I really appreciate your time, and I want to get right into it. And I would love for people to know, who is Mikey Taylor?
Oh, the person or um I am first husband and father. We had a new baby 2 weeks ago. So we have,
Congrats on
thank
that.
you,
Yeah.
first little boy. Yeah, so two girls and a boy. And then I was a skateboarder, still am a skateboarder, but as a pro skateboarder for a long time, about 15 years. And then when my career ended, I had to discover life outside of pro skateboarding, and that
Yeah.
led me into starting my own companies and uh, becoming a business owner, an entrepreneur, and all of that. And that's really kind of what my life looks like now, running a business, still trying to find time to skate on the side, and then manage the house and kids at the same time. I have a full load right now.
Yeah. The full entrepreneur. At what
Yeah.
age were you when you went pro?
How old was I when I went pro?
Yeah.
I turned pro when I was 20 years old. So
20 years old.
I got sponsored when I was 18, or at least I got sponsored where I started getting my first ads, where I was, I guess, technically amateur. And then 2.5 years later, I turned pro.
That's great. And what did that look like? So what did that mean at the? I know it's evolving, right? That the definition of a pro and what comes to you, especially with social media and the internet. Because at the time when you were doing it, it was completely different, and I know that. So when you went pro, what did that look like, and what was your day to day at that time?
So there's no social media. My day to day was just skate all day. What going pro really means is that a company sells your name on it, and it typically starts with the board sponsor. So you have a board sponsor. They decide to turn you pro, and then all of a sudden you have a skateboard. And it says Mikey Taylor on it, and then I'm officially pro. And then in other cases, you could have other sponsors that will promote your name as well. So you could have a signature clothing line or a signature shoe, uh, and then you make more money. That's pretty much it. But from like a day-to-day standpoint, like, we were just out skating, and then, we would have a photo in a magazine possibly once a month. And then we'd film for these video parts that would come out maybe every 3 years. So it was pretty much just like we're out skating all day, like just grown kids.
Yeah, you referred to the kind of the merchandise side of things. So I believe that's huge. It's the finance. So at that time, you're 18, 20 years old. Who's managing your finances? Like, how was that? These you're having these companies reach out to you now, and it's having those conversations or even those opportunities. Who was managing your finances?
So part of my parents' kind of ultimatum, because they were terrified that I wasn't going to college and I was going to be a pro skateboarder. And our industry was small back then. It wasn't like it is now. Like the idea that a pro skateboarder could make $100,000 was unheard of back then. And having a career go beyond maybe 7 years, it was just a different kind of world. So my parents were like, look, you need somebody helping you through this, because if you're not going to be able to go make money like everyone else, you need to have somebody preparing you or helping you. And that led to Randy, who's been helping me since I started making money. And truthfully, I didn't make enough for him to help. I was making, a couple grand a month. But he was kind of taking more of the approach of, look, there's not really much I need to do as far as money management, but I'll at least help you up here, teach you how money works, how you can make more money, because really, you're not going to be able to really do anything with this until you make more. You're not making enough to get into something like investing.
And that leads into the next question, which is so great. What was your first investment? Now that's your world today. At that time when you were making money, was it a small car? Did you buy a home? What was that big purchase for you, or even small one?
So when I started getting into like the idea of investing, like I thought I was like, gonna get into like the most exciting world ever. Majority of investing is actually pretty boring. It's just the what the outcome of it is really cool. But really at that point, gosh, my first purchase was a car. It was an Acura Integra. It cost me $3,000. I bought it outright. That was my like big hurrah. And then everything else, I kind of took. I shouldn't say because it was pretty much Randy at that point. What he was really encouraging me to do was really save as much money as I could and look for ways in which I could invest in myself so that I could make more money. That was really like the beginning idea, was how do you make more? And it was really, I had never heard of it up until that point, but investing in yourself, it just sounds weird, right? But if you think about it, your biggest return will always be when you invest in yourself. And that could either be done financially or even like something like education, right? So if you don't know something, if you're going to pay for some type of education that you can apply towards a trait or a skill or even starting a business, well, the amount of money that will bring in will be greater than any investment you could make, right? On the other side, if you're already making money, you could look at how you could put your money to maybe hire somebody to help you with something, start freeing up time so that you're in a position to maybe grow or scale, and then that leads to more money. So at that point, it was really, and I was a skateboarder, so it was like, how do I get these companies to pay me more? That was like the simple kind of breakdown, and that was like right around the trend of like skateboarders started having their own filmers.
Yeah.
And so, we got our own filmer, and then skaters started looking into having skate parks, and, we got a private skate park, and it was all these ways that we were hoping that we could make more money from sponsors by doing these things. So that was really my original investments. The stuff like investing in storage and investing in some startups, that didn't come until I had a little bit of money.
Yeah, and so it sounds like I know based off your career, you were part of some major shoe brands, right? Or sponsorships, Alien Workshop, DVS Shoes, DC Shoes. Those contracts came with time and you putting in the work. Of course, how you refer to it's like you were just skateboarding. There wasn't social media, there wasn't that whole thing. When you were so young, did you have a game plan with it, or is it more so you were just going with it? Nowadays you see 15-year-olds writing out a 10, 20-year plan, right?
Yeah.
And so when you were doing this, it's kind of, I consider you were paving the way for others because you were going through things and these sponsorships were leading to you traveling, I'm sure. You did a bunch of that. And that was like the high of being a pro skateboarder, right? Traveling and not getting caught up in the money. So at that time, what was your mindset of being a kind of quote unquote, I guess, pro skateboarder towards growing to do more?
Well, I guess there's two parts of it. As far as like paving the way, it was really the generation before me that paved the way, because really when I came in, the pros that were already here, the like Costins and Reynolds and Muskas, they were the ones that brought our industry from something very small to something mainstream. And they were the ones that kind of made it so like, oh my gosh, a pro skateboarder makes 30 grand a year, now makes 100 grand a year. And it was like, they were the ones that changed it. And I was the generation right below that truthfully got to benefit in what they did, really. For me, like as far as like a plan of attack, like we ran these things by every 3 years because those were the length of deals that we had, right? Like a shoe sponsor typically gave you a 3-year contract, and that was like the only type of security that like, we could bank on. So it was like, okay, get to 3 years. What could I do in 3 years and prepare myself to get another 3 years? And it was just these like 3-year increments until I started getting a little older, and it was like, okay, I can't just keep living off 3 years. I've got to put together like a real plan there.
Well, where was that mindset shift with you understanding the life after quote unquote skateboarding, right? Because that's what everyone thinks about. It's like, what are you doing after? Like, because the lifespan of a skateboarder saying it's healthy is what, 7-10 years, if that? So you're looking at your early 30s, you have a full life ahead. So how does that work, and like that mindset towards that post skateboarding life? Where did you have that kind of trigger?
So that's like by far the hardest thing for a pro skateboarder. I think a skateboarder in general, like we don't want this to end. Like truthfully, like, we love it so much that we like ultimately sacrifice everything for it. And then there's a timeline on how long we get to do it. So a lot of us just like don't want to accept that it's going to end because it sounds so daunting and shitty, and it in a lot of ways is. So we just don't usually prepare. But, for me, I started getting in these like big life moments where I wanted to get married, and, I take my wife, my fiance's dad, out to lunch to like try to ask him like, hey, can I marry your daughter? And, first question he asked me, what are you going to do after skateboarding? Like, how are you going to support my daughter? And it was like, oh, damn, here comes here comes real life and real responsibility, you know? And it was like, I think that started it. And then my wife, you know, she kind of, and I remember it really clearly. One day she was like, hey, you don't need to figure this out right this second, but I want you to start thinking of ways of start thinking of a plan or thinking about what you want to do after skateboarding. And it was really that conversation that kind of took a very obsessive personality and went, okay, shit, I need to own companies. And then it was just like, you know, I ran into my friend Atiba, who's a skate photographer, and we both rode for this company, OGO, which was like backpacks, right? And OGO got rid of their skate program. We're all of a sudden sponsorless when it came to backpacks. And Atiba's, you know, we're out of school, and Atiba goes, hey, dude, so like, we got to figure out a backpack sponsor, right? And, you know, my wife just plugged in this idea into my head. I'm like, no, we don't. Like, let's just start our own. Like, let's just create our own backpack company, not knowing anything. And then it was like the next week I see another friend and he brings up a company. Let's start another company. I just became like hell bent on trying to own companies without understanding the amount of time and energy and difficulty that went into them. And, you know, I didn't know that until we started one. And then that is kind of through that process, I started realizing at least that it felt like there was more control in my destiny or in my future, even though control, I think at the end of the day, is something we tell ourselves for comfort. But nonetheless, it felt like I had more control. So then I kind of really started leaning towards trying to own my own companies.
Yeah, I think it was ultimately, it just sounds like you wanted more than a 3-year deal or a 3-year plan,
Well,
right?
look,
It's understanding that you're playing longer term. Like, I have ownership over this, I have control towards, as you said, we don't have the control of the destiny, but the decision making and what goes into that.
so this is one thing I really struggled with, right? I loved skateboarding. Like really, like I never had an intention to be a pro skateboarder. I just didn't want to stop skating. And that was the only solution I could find to not having to get a job back then was I just need to figure out how to have companies pay me, right? But then the biggest challenge and the thing that just ended up killing me is like I felt like my entire career and my ability to ride a skateboard for a longer amount of time was dependent on a company retaining me as a skater or as a sponsored skater of their company. And that was like very uncomfortable for me. I don't know why. It just was like, it felt like there were so many variables to my ability to continue skating. And I tried to eliminate those variables as much as I could. But the reason I talk about control, with everything I did, at the end of the day, company still was able to let me go and my career still eventually ended. But it was that, like, I think uncomfortableness that led me towards, look, if I start my own companies, then I don't have to worry about getting kicked off, but I now have to worry about companies going out of business and not being able to, you know, there's a whole new element of challenge, which why I went back to the control. I think it's all in our heads for us to feel comfortable, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. What would you say was your biggest business lesson with starting up, as you referred to the backpacks? You were new to it. That's very, you know, typical in today for those listening or watching. 18 to 25-year-olds starting a company is like you could do it in 10 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And half of the time, I would say most people don't know what they're doing. And there's a certain sense of excitement, right? Because there's the unknown. But then there's the reality, which is sometimes you'll wake up and you're like down deep, negative in debt and other things that, you know, there's Uncle Sam, you have to pay taxes on things you sell. It's not educating, understanding. What was your biggest lesson when you started? Let's say, you know, you referred to this backpack company or other ones that you were just like so excited about.
There are two big lessons for me. One is that I didn't know how to work with people. You know, I came from skateboarding, man. It was like, it was all me. It was like, okay, I want to film this trick. I want it to look a certain way. I'm going to call that filmer. I'm in control. It's just me. When it comes to business, the strength is in the team. And I really had to learn how to work with people. It's just something I didn't know and really struggled with in the beginning. And then two, I think the other thing is like, there's always something you don't know, right? It doesn't matter who you are. It's me, it's you, it's anyone watching. There's always things we don't know. And right. In business, the longer it takes you to get to that conclusion, the higher your risk of failing is. So I had to learn that, like, I need to be really transparent and clear on the things I don't know, and don't worry about if somebody thinks I'm not smart or I don't know what I'm doing. That insecurity needs to be removed, because at the end of the day, it's all about the success of the business. So I kind of had to just become very transparent in what I'm good at and what I'm bad at, and whatever I'm bad at, I need somebody there ASAP to either help me or teach me along the way. So those are like the two things: transparency and the importance of the team.
I love that. I want to get into the transition of post skateboarding life. Commune Capital, which is, I would say, your fourth child, right? and and in what you do, I love your content, especially with the education portion of it. For those who don't know, what is Commune Capital?
So commune, at the very simplest form, is a bunch of people that believe that that we're stronger together, and that we could put all of our money to buy assets that we can't individually, in the hope that we can achieve financial freedom, that our money can pay ourselves enough interest to then we can live off that interest, really, at the end of the day.
That's so good. And where did this come from? This idea to do this. You at that time, I'm sure towards the end of your career, you're making a substantial amount of money, and you could have gone into anything. Why was it, real estate investing?
Well, it really happened because when my career ended, I was in such a unique situation that a lot of other pro skateboarders, or even athletes in general, aren't in. And that was, I didn't have to figure out how to get a job. It was like, I was left with just having to work through the emotional, gut punch of, I'm no longer a pro skateboarder. But as far as like income, I didn't have to, quickly adjust for survival. And in that scenario, it was like a very mixed feeling, I guess you could say, where I was thankful and happy, but I also felt incredibly shitty at the same time. It was almost like I felt like a survivor's guilt, that like all of my friends and peers were experiencing something different than I experienced. And it was like, okay, I don't want to be the only one over here. Like, I came from a world of skateboarding that is really community based. Like, for us as skaters, we would go skate with other pro skateboarders, and like there was never this like, competition of who can do the best trick at the spot. It was always like, okay, Roger, you have the trick that you're going to do that's the best you can do. I'm going to try my best, and we're all going to encourage each other to get the tricks done that we want to do, right? It's very much like we are all here together. And post-career, I felt like it was just me. And I just didn't like that feeling. And so in that kind of moment, I was really starting to think, like, how can I bring as much of my friends here and experience something that I think is how we should all experience the end of our careers. And, as I started breaking down why I was here, a lot of it led to not only those early conversations with Randy, who was really my financial mentor, but even all of the things he had me investing in that put me in a position of, well, shit, my career's over and I don't need to call DC or, some of my other sponsors and ask if I could work for them. It just wasn't an option. So ultimately, I wanted as many people to experience that as possible. And so that's what led me to start the company.
That's great. You also, for those who don't know, also started a brewing company, right? Known as St. Archer. I would love to hear the story of how that came about. And, we touched on you starting a backpack company, and then soon before you know it, post skateboarding life. Yeah. You're starting a brewing company with, was it 3 others, I believe?
Two other friends, Paul and Josh.
Two of your friends. So I want to hear the story of, when was that moment? Who gave who the phone call? Hey, man, let's start a brewing company. And the process that came from about it, because I know you found success and exited a few years later.
Yeah. So I was down in San Diego with Josh, who was my partner, and he was a surf filmmaker at the time. And he wanted to do a skate film, and we were connected, and we're like, all right, let's just go do a skate film. So we started in San Diego, and when I was in San Diego, I got a call from a close friend of mine, Mike Mo, and he was going to start a sunglass company. It ended up becoming Glassy. And he called me and was like, hey, dude, I have this idea. I want to start sunglasses. I'm going to call it Glassy. Do you want to do it with me? And I'm like, I'm in business. I'm in startup mode. I'm like, I want to do everything. Hell yeah, I want to start this. I'll talk to you later. Hang up the phone. And, Josh, who was filming me, looked at me. He's like, what was that about? And I was like, oh, dude, I'm doing the sunglass company, And he was like, oh, that's cool. But like, as we started talking, he was like, well, yeah, but like, sunglasses, that's kind of a big part of our world. Like, wouldn't it be cool to do something like skateboarding or surfing or snowboarding never seen? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. Like, it'd be awesome to do something new. And that conversation 4 hours later led to us in our hotel room, about to go to sleep. I turn off the lights, and Josh goes, like, beer. Like, how sick would it be to do beer? And all of a sudden, I, hit the light. I'm like, beer? Are you kidding me? I was like, hell yeah, do that. Yeah, we should totally do that. So, we stay up for like 2 or 3 hours later. We wake up the next morning. We completely abandon the film. We drive home, and on the way home, he's like, yo, like, what's up with your boy P-Rod? Like, P-Rod's a business owner. He's an investor. Why don't you call P-Rod? I'm like, all right. So I call Paul on our drive home, and I'm like, hey, dude, you need to meet us at Starbucks off Canaan. We have an idea. Come right now. And so Paul meets us at this Starbucks. We pitch this idea that's not even 24 hours old. And Paul's like, I'm down. Let's do this. So the three of us basically, that was the beginning journey of pretty much a year later of us trying to put together this brewery in which we all had really little experience in doing. And that's where a lot of stuff we learned from. But when we were doing it, Randy, again, I was like, hey, I got this guy, Randy. He's taught me so much when it comes to money. Let's bring the idea to him and let's see how he can help. And, as we're pitching this idea to him, he was like, okay, cool. Like, where are you guys at? And we're like, well, it's just an idea. And he was like, okay, well, we're going to need a business plan and blah, blah. And we're like, business plan? I don't know what that means. And he really kind of worked us or brought us through all the stages that went into starting the company, helped us create our business plan. When it came to raising money, which none of us had experience in, he helped not only get all the documents in order, but also
the logistics, the back end stuff that everyone needs, the paperwork. Yeah.
100%. And then also like how you pitch and how you respond to investors. And one thing I didn't mention is Josh, who is my partner, he has this gift that he can sell anything naturally. Like it's not like he's a over the top sales guy. He just has this natural gift where like when he speaks, you're like this. Yeah. So, there was with that skill set, oh my gosh, it really, really put us in a position of being able to raise all the capital we needed. And then, we ended up starting the company, and that was, I think, for all of us, one of the biggest learning curves that we've all been through. I'm getting the baby passed off to me. So hang on one sec. Hey, dude. All right. Sorry.
No, you're good, man.
Hey,
Dad, family first. That's amazing.
Hey. This is our little dude right here. If you can see him. Hey, buddy. So basically with that, that kind of became all of our schooling. It was,
correct me if what was it? 3 years later, you guys ended up selling the company to Miller Coors Light, I believe, right? Or the parent company.
Yeah, I think we opened doors officially. It was in May of 2012, and then we ended up selling it, I believe, November of 2015. So it was quick. It was, way quicker than all of us had hoped for, or not hoped for, had even thought was possible. Like we would always joke, like, Josh and me would always joke about our kids one day running it, and we'd have this thing forever, and then 3 years goes by with the blink of an eye, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay.
I learned about it during the Super Bowl for the commercial.
Wasn't that crazy?
Yeah, so I'm watching, you pay attention to the commercials, and then I'm looking up and I see St. Archer. I'm like, oh, that's a dope brick, and I hadn't triggered it, and then I see you, and then I'm like, wait, what's going on?
Isn't that crazy? I know that was a crazy experience. Even though like we didn't own the company anymore, but like to see something that like we built, and I will say this: me, Josh, and Paul started it, but I mean, there were so many people that were involved in not only bringing it to life, but then getting it to the point of an exit, and then to see something that was like an idea that was inspired by a friend to end up like having a Super Bowl commercial. It was, I mean, I called Paul right when it happened. I was like, dude, this is the craziest shit I've ever seen. You know?
Did you guys have no idea that it was going to be in the Super Bowl?
No, we did. I got a call from Adam, who's I believe he's a CMO there, and he was like, "Hey, we have this idea. We want to run a Super Bowl commercial. Kind of, we were talking about having Paul in it. What do you think? Could you help us, put it together as far as like, seeing if Paul could do it?" And then him and Paul and the team went out and filmed it, and then all of a sudden it was on Super Bowl.
That's amazing, man. That's so
Yeah,
amazing.
it was really cool. Yeah, totally.
So you've had your personal career experience with skateboarding, and it sounds like, well, the term I really wanted to touch on was, it sounds like post skateboarding was identity, right? Of understanding like, who am I now? My friends are still skateboarding. I'm like out of the game. What should I be a part of? And you were lucky enough. Another consistent thing throughout every story you've told us is that you had other like-minded friends. You had one friend who called you for an idea, and you're like, hey, I have another friend who's starting this company. And those two things are powerful, and I want people to remember that, because that just meant you were putting yourself in circles of influence or constant movement forward to do something, right? And so now we're looking at today where you have Commune Capital and kind of your landscape of where you said you believe the true wealth is investing into your future. What would you say, we're in a very strange and weird time during, COVID-19. The question, I had gotten a DM, it was a couple of days ago, a friend said, hey man, I'd love to have someone on your Instagram live to do real estate and question them about like the future. Yeah. And then crazy enough, you got back to me last night and you're like, hey, are you available tomorrow? I'm like, perfect. 1 p.m. Eastern, let's do this. Yeah. What would you say is the future towards real estate in general in the next 12 to 16, 18 months? Because there's a lot of uncertainty.
Well, you nailed it. There's uncertainty, and for what, I mean, this is not the answer anyone wants to hear, but it's the most truthful, honest answer. We are all speculating to some extent because this is different in a lot of ways. So basically, when something like a correction happens, what we do is we look back at how the asset that we're participating in performed in the last one, the prior one, so that we can kind of gauge what to expect moving forward and how that's going to impact our investments. There's a part of this one that, we've looked back and we believe there's going to be some aspects that kind of translate over, but there is something new about this one. We've never seen government forced shutdown like we have. We've never seen not only the unemployment rate so high, but it's an artificial unemployment rate, right? So there's now the question of, well, how fast does that bounce back if it wasn't the free market that decided it, right? And then the question becomes, well, at what rate do companies hire back? And do they hire 100%? Do they hire 70%? How many people don't make it through this? And the reason I'm saying that is because you're trying to gauge how long the recession's going to be, right? Hang on, I'm going to scoot over to bouncing mode, but I'm going to answer this question.
Totally good.
Hang on. Watch this. Here we go. This is what a seasoned dad of 3 kids on Instagram Live with a 2-week-old. So basically there is elements where we're looking at, okay, if jobs are going to be, if there's going to be that many people on unemployment, and when the hire back happens, if it's still going to be larger than what we've seen at the past, then you have to make some type of expectations on how that's going to affect real estate, right? So if you have a slow recovery and you have that many people unemployed, well, you probably need to consider that you're not going to have crazy rent growth for a year, potentially 2 years. Are you going to see a decline in rent growth, and what impact that has on the other components of real estate? Are interest rates going to remain low, which that's kind of what we've been told? Are cap rates going to compress or soften up? These are all elements in which we're kind of speculating, but I will say this, and this is what I think everybody needs to remember. When things like this happen, there's opportunity. There's going to be new things that come out of this, not only in real estate, but even in startups. It's like if you go back to 2008, 2009, we had some of the coolest companies come out of that movement, right? You had Uber, you had it was like all these things like boom, boom, boom. So that's going to happen now. And then in real estate as well, like you've got to look at all the different asset classes inside of real estate, right? You have storage, you have industrial, you have multifamily, you have single family, you have hotel, you have office space. All of them are going to be hit differently in this. You know, you look at office space, and I think this is going to be an interesting one. All of us have been forced to work at home. We're all doing stuff like this, right? We're all talking digitally. Well, our company's going to go back to that. Our company's going to go back to an office space when their business is still able to run for a fraction of the expenses. And if the answer is no, then office space is going to get disrupted, right? Sorry, now I'm balancing. We're going to balance this.
You're good.
You know, if you look at retail, I think that's an obvious one, right? It's like retail is being hit so hard, but how many people are now experiencing, thank you. How many people are now experiencing shopping online, right? Like you saw this big boom happen when e-com hit, but there was still a big demographic that liked going to the store and liked this physical experience. Well, now everyone as a whole has experienced the convenience of ordering something and it showing up at my door and not having to fight or grind for the specific thing I want. What's the impact on retail going to be? I think it's going to be massive. You're seeing hotels right now just destroyed, right? Single family, I think that's going to be an interesting one. I think single family, you know, something like storage, I think storage does great through this. Multifamily and single family, I think is where there is some speculation, but at the end of the day, it's like the belief that everyone needs a place to live, right? It's everyone needs a place to live, and there's still a shortage on the amount of places that you can buy or rent. So I think that favors well, but you know, there's two components, and I'm rambling, but there's so much to this. As far as buying buildings, one thing that you always want to consider, and this was a year ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, and will still be the same strategy moving forward, is you want to buy buildings and buy them in a way that they can handle disruption, right? So if rents end up coming down, if cap rates soften or compress, like you want to put yourself to where you aren't forced to sell your building if that happens, right? Because really, when stuff like this happens, it really hits the valuation of it more than anything. And so if a valuation is hit and you don't have a building that can withstand this type of disruption, what I mean by that is buildings cash flow, right? They work like businesses. So in an apartment specifically, you have all your rental income that comes in. That's your gross income. You have the expenses that you have to pay in order to maintain the building or the operation. You're left with your net income. After that, you pay your debt service, and then you have your cash flow, right? Well, if you have enough cash flow, then it doesn't matter the valuation of the building because you're not forced to sell. So if you're in the right position, you go, okay, yeah, shit, this isn't a time to sell. We're going to hold. We can hold another 3 years. We can hold another 5 years because we know the market is going to come back, right? It's the people that are in a position where their building does not cash flow and they're now having to pay their debt out of hand. So the building's underwater and now they're forced to sell, and they're selling at a time where it is not ideal to sell. That's where the impact happens. So I think buying strategy is you're just seeing right now how important it is to buy buildings that are able to get through stuff like this. As far as COVID goes, the impact from it, like, dude, we're waiting to see, like, are people still going to like tiny homes? Are people still going to like these 200 square foot units? Or after being locked down for, 8 weeks, do people want bigger space? Are people going to want a backyard or a patio? Is there going to be kind of things that real estate investors need to start including in their properties because they're going to have a higher value after something like this COVID thing? Yes, right? So, look, there is going to be an impact from it. I think, like, when people talk about real estate, specifically multifamily, they talk about it as if it's indestructible. No investment is ever indestructible, ever. There's just some investments that do a lot better through challenging times than others do. And multifamily is one of those, but it can still be impacted. So we will see the impact, but at least what we think, this is also a buying opportunity. It's like if prices come down and people are going to be forced to sell, you're now buying things at a time that aren't ideal to sell. That means it's ideal to buy. So, I think there's opportunity for sure, but I think this whole conversation is short term. Like if you stretch this thing out long term, which I think is how you should be looking at real estate, I don't think the impact is that significant as what we're feeling right this moment.
These are the fear of anxiety and fear of the unknown. Because
Yeah,
ultimately, like as you said, I think you said something so right, which is the basis that everyone needs a place to live.
yeah,
And I also believe the part that you 100%, it triggered me where you're like, I don't think people are going to think about 200 square feet. I don't even own a home, and I'm like, I need a backyard.
yeah,
I
yeah,
need a backyard to just be outside in.
yeah,
So I think it's those questions or conversations that I think will happen definitely on the interest of the type of properties people will want.
yeah.
What would you say is a great like financial lesson that you learned growing up that like is still congruent today, that could be applied to anyone listening? So I know you referred to investments. If I'm not mistaken, one of your first investments was a storage unit, right? It was a storage unit, and I thought
Yeah.
that's so interesting
Yeah.
because typically you would hear a home, right? Like back then it was like having a
Well,
home,
hang
and
on. I have to clarify. My first purchase was a home.
okay,
I don't view a home as an investment. So
got it.
I
Okay,
bought a home that I
okay,
was living in.
yeah.
But as far as like what I view an investment as, storage was one of the first and still to this day, one of the greatest.
So how did that? I'm curious.
But to answer your question though, because I
Yeah.
actually think it's a really valuable question. It's funny because the principles are so simple, and I think everyone listening would go, "Yeah, dude, that's so obvious." But really, at the end of the day, spend less than you make. For some reason, we all are challenged by that because there's a behavior element that goes beyond the logic side. But spend less than you make. Don't be in debt, and have a cash flow and have a cash reserve beyond your emergency fund. So if you're looking at an ideal scenario, right? You spend less than you make. You're putting money towards an emergency fund. This is money that in case something happens, like, I don't know, this virus runs rampant and our whole world gets shut down. An emergency fund is meant so that if unexpected things happen, your tire blows out, something that's not involved in your budget, you're not having to go towards a credit card to solve it, right? And then beyond emergency fund, having a cash reserve is important for two things. One, right now what we're experiencing is, okay, the world's been shut down. A lot of our jobs have been compromised. You need to get money to get you through it. But also, what you want is money to participate in the opportunity, right? Like talking back and talking to all my friends that were around during 2008, right? Everyone who didn't participate in 2008 said the same thing. I wish I could have invested, but I just didn't have the cash, right? So we know that opportunity lies in uncertain times, but we forget that we need cash to participate in those opportunities. So, sitting on cash and looking at cash as opportunity cash is incredibly valuable. And then beyond, then you start putting money towards investing. But too often times we look at it as so binary. You make money and then you put all your money towards investments. But there's actually a cushion in between, and that is you do need to sit on cash. Like cash is king. I know people still shit on it, but you can't participate in any of this stuff without it. So I think it's, you make your money, you have a cash reserve, then you have investments, and you always maintain that order because, dude, life throws us curveballs all the time, and you don't want to get hit and be in a position where you don't have any kind of cushion to get you onto the next stage, right? It's like, it doesn't even have to be COVID. We can be in normal life. Like you lose your career, right? If you're an employee, boss says, later, dude, and you have no cash to get you to the next thing, now you're going into the negative and having to go into debt. You always want to stay in the positive. So you've got to have the beginning structures correct. And then once you have the foundation, then you start doing things like investing and all the stuff that seems to be the hot topic now. You know?
Right. What would you say, is there any book that you recommend for someone starting to invest that they should read or educate themselves on like, let's say even the terms of, you walked us through of what it meant to have a rental property income from gross income to net income and those type of terms. Is there something that you would recommend for the first time investor?
So I know I wouldn't have liked this answer if I was 19, 20 and heard somebody say it, but it's still the best way to go about it. I would start with a handful of books that don't go into the specific terminology of an investment, but lay the groundwork to what investing means. And for me, those books were, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was a big one, really important. Richest Man in Babylon, Think and Grow Rich. All of those books are really good for you to at least I think have the right foundation before starting. And then in something specific to real estate, a really good book is a book called Set for Life. And it goes through, I'm blanking on the guy who wrote it, but it's one of the guys at Bigger Pockets. And it goes through all the terminology, all of kind of how the inner workings of real estate work. If that's an industry or an asset that you want to get into, that's a really good book. If you're into startups and business world, Principles is one of my favorite by Ray Dalio. But more than anything, if you want to be educated and it is something specific to real estate, I think Bigger Pockets is by far one of the best platforms out right now for you to go check out.
I love that. Is there any podcasts that you love listening to on a daily basis to get into the mind of Mikey Taylor?
Yes. If on the investing side, I listen to some real estate ones, apartment building investing. I really like. There's a cash flow podcast by this guy Rod Khleif that I like, and then, gosh, other podcasts. What's interesting, man? I go in waves. I'll be heavy on podcasts, and then I'll be heavy on audiobooks. And right now, I'm actually more heavy on audiobooks. And so I know in 2 months, I'm going to switch back over to my podcast grind. But right now I'm on Audible.
I love it. I just want to get feedback from everyone that's been listening. If you found this valuable with Mikey, educating you on finance, let's get some thumbs up. Someone wrote the author you see there of the
Scott Trenchman. That's right. And his book is great. Yeah. If anybody wants to get that one, it's a really good book. And I have no whatever those things are called, affiliate. I have no affiliate anything with Bigger Pockets, but it is a great platform.
Yeah,
for sure.
Swipe up now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mikey, how do you make money now, Mikey? Oh, I just go on live streams. I just shout out this thing called Bigger Pockets, and the checks just coming in.
That's great. Mikey, man, honestly, you've been so amazing. You see all the thumbs up here, the amount of knowledge and education. For those who don't know, even, I love watching your page because two things. It makes me realize, what of a G you were back in the day in skateboarding with your throwback videos. And then you have these sit downs, and I genuinely believe have conversations that people, what I say, are taboo about finances. You ask questions and educate people on everything of what it means, finances to investments. You're so knowledgeable about it. So for those who don't, who follow me and don't follow him, if you're looking to get into investing, I highly recommend following him because, again, you have these, I know now because of the circumstance you're not having them as often, but you were pumping them out with, I saw just fireside chats where you were just crushing it and educating. And so I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. And thank you so much.
Dude, my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. I love this stuff. I could do this. My wife would kill me because I'll seriously do this all day. I love, I'm a people person. I love talking with people. I love trying to share any type of experience I went through that might help somebody. It's just, this is how I get fired up. So, dude, absolutely my pleasure. I should thank you for this.
No, man. No, thank you. I appreciate it. And then we'll be in touch, man. I appreciate you. Congrats again on your boy.
Thank you.
Going on 2 weeks. I know that's huge. And I think that was an extremely vet move. The baby was crying. You switched the chairs, start bouncing around. That just shows, you got it locked down with your investments and how to be a dad. So that's what I call truly pivoting in the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
So again, I appreciate you, and then I should say thank you to your wife because she's the one probably taking care of him right now. So
she's the real legend here. She really is.
Yeah, You have a killer day, man. If you need anything, of course, you could reach out to me, and then obviously we'll be in touch once this goes live.